they can't keep up with the volume of activity in the restaurant because they're just so short-staffed. And again, that is where technology steps in and prevents that burnout. You want these staff who are working in restaurants to have great experience and turn this into careers and create great guest experiences. And again, that's where technology fills that gap.
Today on Dirty Linen, we are chatting to Peter Dougherty, Lightspeed's General Manager of Hospitality. Lightspeed is a platform that'll be familiar to many Australian venues, a point of sale and e-commerce software provider. Peter's visiting from Canada. Peter, welcome to Australia, first of all, and welcome to Dirty Linen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dani. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
What's the purpose of your visit to Australia?
So I'm here for the week. I'm here to meet, obviously, with our teams here in Sydney and Melbourne. Of course, meeting with customers, meeting with folks looking at Lightspeed as well, and obviously keeping in touch with the Australian hospitality industry.
Yeah, I feel like, Australians and Canadians, we feel like we have a lot in common. I'd love to get your perspective on the hospitality industry in Canada. How's it feeling? What are the pressure points? How are things going?
So I think, and actually this is a big reason why I do visits like this, not only in obviously Australia, Canada, US, our business in Europe, is to keep in touch with, what are restaurateurs facing around the world. Obviously, last couple of years, very trying times for the industry, and now obviously seeing a massive revival. But in Canada, actually similar to what I've heard over the last week here in Australia, is number one challenge facing restaurants today is my dining room is full, it's packed, but I still have to figure out how to do delivery because tons of people discovered delivery during the pandemic, and I'm having trouble hiring enough staff to fill my rosters. I'm dealing with inflation, and I'm starting to turn towards technology because I just can't fill that roster. But it's a similar story as in Canada as in Australia.
I mean, are there any outlier countries from, your experience, different states of the US or in Europe? Are there any countries where they're like, yeah, everything's pretty good here. Nothing's too expensive. We've got heaps of customers. Staff are, beating down the door to work with me.
No, I wish, but no, we're hearing the same thing everywhere. I mean, maybe a little bit more here and there, but by and large, it's the same story everywhere. The restaurant industry is facing very similar pressures.
Interesting. I mean, I think one of the interesting and useful things about technology platforms such as yourselves is that you are really able to get lots of data about restaurants. What are some of the interesting facts and figures that you can share with us?
Absolutely. And we are very much a data-centric company. We love to understand what's happening in the industry. And I think, we pull data. Let's just talk about the Australian industry here. We pull data every month from all of our venues, and we have over 10,000 venues here in Australia. And I think the first thing that stands out to me is the sector, the business. This business is really growing. We know the business has grown. Or restaurants business is growing 35% year on year. So 2022 compared to 2021, and even within it, we know that bars are growing 45% year on year, cafes are growing 26% year on year. And the restaurant industry, table service restaurants are growing 35% year on year. So across the sector, restaurants are open, they're vibrant, and they're full.
I guess, if you think about year on year data, that feels kind of obvious because we were just coming out of lockdowns around this time last year. But what about some of the more recent data? Is there anything like month to month that you can that shows any interesting trends?
We see the same trend on month to month, and I agree. Obviously, saw some serious lockdowns this time last year, and we even have data for Victoria with some of the most extended lockdowns. But even month to month, so just compared to this month to last month, the industry grew nearly 8% at 7.5%. So we know even month on month, the growth is fantastic.
Right, because some of the stats that I've seen. Restaurants 8% up. From September to October, bars up 10%, cafes up 4%. I guess, when I read out those figures, I'm also thinking, but if inflation's running at, 5, 6, 7%, then I can really see where the restaurant or the cafe is full, but perhaps the books still aren't looking so good.
Yeah, but when you look at inflation, it could be 6, 7, 8% year on year, but it's not that much month on month. So we see the sales or the revenues of the restaurants is growing faster than inflation, which is exciting.
And what do you think it is that's driving that growth? Is it innovations within the businesses? Is it the fact that people are wanting to go out, or they're spending? What are you seeing?
I think there's a couple factors. I think obviously the first is people love to be with other people. They love the experience of being in a restaurant, that the texture of that experience. They just love it. And obviously being deprived of that for so long, you get this overcorrection where people go out. And obviously that's been the story for the last year. But I think on the tech side, you see restaurateurs, especially here in Australia, a market that adopts technology well ahead of the rest of the world, is using that for their own benefit. I think a great example is that QR code ordering experience that we're also familiar with. 2 years ago, less than 8% of our customers were using that experience where you could order via QR code, whereas now, 2 years later, it's almost a quarter. It's or just over a quarter. It's 26%. And so that's a great example of here in Australia how restaurants are adopting technology to help drive that growth. Even within that, we know an order that comes through QR codes is between a quarter or 25% and a third larger. So not only are people adopting it, but the actual ticket size, the order size is bigger. So we see this vibrance in the Australian hospitality sector adopting this great technology to make sure that they succeed. And we'd love to see that.
Why do you think that is? Why would the orders be bigger when they're done using a technology platform?
So there's a couple of things to it. First, there's a guest has there's the frequency of reordering. So maybe let's just say a bar or a pub. I'm sitting at the table. I want another pint. Well, rather than waiting for a staff member to come over to me, I can just place the order right away on my phone. So I might get that extra pint on my ticket compared to having to order in a more traditional manner. There's also the upselling that can happen in the app. What about, hey, you're ordering, I don't know, this dessert or this main, it'd go great with this cocktail or this pint. Or you could even upsell them to a more expensive pint. And so restaurateurs can use that to really drive the average ticket size.
I mean, it's, I guess, the conversation that we always have around technology and ordering is around the human touch and around the way that people still create that hospitality experience, even while making the most of technology that's available. What sort of conversations do you have with people around that?
So I think restaurants in general, obviously there's the passion for the food and the passion for the guest experience, but there's also hey, I'm just running an independent business. And when you're running an independent business, one of the key questions that you always have to answer is, what do I do next to grow my business? What is the right next step? And I think that's something that obviously, because we have such a good proportion of the restaurants here in Australia using Lightspeed, a lot of them turn to us. And obviously that's why we look at data so closely. We look at industry trends, and obviously why we're so focused on great technology to help them grow. But I think even when we think about the venues using Lightspeed, we know from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the industry grew for the months where we still have data, August to September, it grew 1.3% across the whole sector. So obviously big number. But Lightspeed venues grew 1.8%. So our customers are growing faster than the industry. They're growing 38% faster than the industry. So we know when we look at data, when we work with these restaurateurs to build great experiences, that we know that they're succeeding. And that's something we're super proud of.
I mean, a lot of the conversations around, making businesses stronger, more vibrant, more viable has been around back of house and menu creation, whether it's dish simplification or reducing menu items. What kinds of trends are you seeing in that regard? Yeah,
and I think, I love that question. Actually, it ties a lot to the stories we're hearing around the world. Obviously labor, inflation, supply chain. We also know that obviously from a restaurant experience, obviously what's happening on our local farms is a big part of what gets served on our plates. And so when we look at just, inflation within the supply chain, if I'm a restaurateur and all of a sudden I don't have this ingredient available to me for the next 6 weeks, or, this supplier says, hey, I can't get you this fish for another 2 months, obviously you have to simplify your menu. And making those decisions of, well, what am I going to cut, or what am I going to consolidate, and what am I going to focus on for the next month on my menu is a really tough question, because ultimately that is what you're selling to your guests. That is your revenue. And so making those decisions are super tough. And exactly as you said it, Dani, restaurants are consolidating their menus, but they're making really smart choices of what they should be keeping and what they should be cutting. Beyond just, hey, what do I make the most profit on? It's what do my guests love? What do bring guests back? What dishes are bringing guests back into my restaurant? And that's a key thing that you need to be thinking about as a restaurateur today. Because with inflation just running away, consumers will have less ability to dine out. So when you do bring them into your restaurant, you need to make sure you have a higher chance of bringing them back.
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is you're saying that identity is really important, and it's as important to know who you are as to know who you're not. I think it is something that we've perhaps seen a lot as people have, regrouped after all the various lockdowns. It's like this realization that you can't be all things to all people, so you might as well be really clear and direct. I mean, I've definitely noticing that as a customer, that the restaurants that really resonate are those that seem so sure about their identity.
Yeah, and I was just last night actually here in Sydney. I was at Ghibli's, and they had a very focused menu. We obviously had a really great time, but they were very focused on their menu, and they said, this is what we're serving, this is what we're focused on, this is what you should have. And obviously, having been there before, it was a very focused menu. And so the idea there is, just as you said, this is the identity, this is the experience we're trying to create for our guests, and just doubling down on that.
Yeah. Well, so what did you eat? What was great?
Well, I had, there was a couple of drinks involved, of course, but we had a good time. I had some great oysters. Had some great, steamed vegetables. Some really great trout. Some good steak. Yeah, it was a great experience actually. But what tops it all off, obviously, is the food and the focused menu. But of course, the service and the style and the sequence of service was also very attuned to the food that they were serving. And so, when it comes out, at what point is there a break? When do they change the dishes and the cutlery? That's all part of that experience that a restaurant just creates, that texture of when you're in the room, that it really is part of their identity that they're presenting to the world.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I've had, quite a few conversations recently with restaurateurs exactly on that. It's like beyond the menu, it's about, the experience, those different touch points. And I think, there was a feeling that people didn't want service so much at their table. We're nervous about contact, about getting too close, about breathing, the same air. I mean, do you feel like there are changes in that long term? Or do you feel again it's part of each restaurant's identity?
Well, I definitely think there's changes long term, but at the same time, I think, if you talk just about people and the experiences that people look for, humans are social animals. They want to be out with their friends. They want to interact with people. And so when you go to, another great Lightspeed customer I was at on Monday night is Nomad here in Sydney again. And, the staff are there, they're presenting themselves. It's part of the experience, the conversation. They're telling me about what they're serving. Here's a great wine that goes with it. That is part of the experience. And, of course, we've all lived through this pandemic, but as we come out of it, I think just people cannot turn away from the fact that we want to be with other people. And I think that's also part of the experience. If you're going into a coffee shop and you're just doing grab takeaway, obviously that's going to be a different experience than when you're sitting in a restaurant or, like Zeus' Street Greek, QSR chain here in Australia, obviously using Lightspeed, totally different experience and presentation than Nomad or Jane or Carlton Wine Rooms.
What about in Canada? Like, what's happening in cafes, restaurants, and bars in Canada? What are some of the trends that you're seeing?
So I think actually Australia is a really interesting market that almost tells you the future about how the restaurant industry and the rest of the world is going to go. Because like we said before, the challenges are the same, but what I love about the Australian hospital sector is they really are early adopters of great technology, and you see the results. And you see restaurateurs in Canada and the US and now Europe also too, turning to that new technology. And because of our experience here, and because we have such a large customer base here in Australia, over 10,000 venues, we know, okay, what are the trends, what's happening, and we can bring that to Canada and help bring it to restaurateurs in Canada and tell them about, hey, even big groups like Lion Brewing or Carlton, what they're doing in their pubs and their sub brands, and bring that to venues in Canada about, hey, QR codes, 20 to 25% higher ticket size. You should be thinking about that and using Australian businesses use case for that. And same is true in Europe. The whole pay at table experience. rolling out across Europe that we see over the last couple of years is also coming over to Canada and the US. So because Lightspeed has this reach around the world, we can use the experiences of people from around the world to help inform each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting flip, I guess, where technology has been, I guess, following along behind businesses and solving problems. But I suppose this idea of anticipating and driving change is actually, it's a bit of a flip.
Well, I think another, and just to riff on what you're saying, talk about wages and the cost of labor. Obviously, it's really tough to fill your roster right now. Obviously, all restaurateurs know that. And so wages are just going to have to go up. And so we also see at the same time the cost of food and the spirits you're serving in your restaurant is going up. So just the cost of going to a restaurant is going to go up. That's just, the nature obviously of inflation. But we're seeing that around the world. And so how does technology correct for that? How do you create experiences where you're leverage, you have to have a great dining experience, but you just have fewer people on staff to help you with that. I mean, technology is the way out. Technology is the answer. But the magic, and I think what we do at Lightspeed very well, is how do you implement technology in a restaurant that doesn't take away from the magic of a restaurant? And that, I think, is what we do super well. But it is a key question that we think about here at Lightspeed, but we work super closely with the venues to make sure that they feel the same as well.
So what is the magic? Like, how do you create those efficiencies without losing the experience?
Yeah, well, we talked about QR code, but I think another kind of riff on that is, well, what if a server or a staff member can take an order with their iPhone? They have the Lightspeed app on their phone, they can place orders, but not because they're going to have the phone, they're standing beside the table with the phone taking an order and the guest sees the back of the phone. You're still interacting with the guest. You're talking to the guest. You're telling them about what's in this dish. What's in. Where are the oysters from, etc. And the reason you have time to do that as a staff member is instead of having to run back to a pause, across the dining room and then punching it in, then going back to the next table. Like as I'm walking from table to table, I can punch it on the phone, send the beers to the bar, make sure that the guests are getting it, and then I can go straight to the next table. And even if it doesn't sound like a lot, but that extra 2-3 minutes that you get as a staff member, well, all of a sudden you can manage 5 tables instead of 4. I mean, that's a 20% labor cost reduction. And so that is how technology, despite rising labor costs, means that you can keep that magic of the restaurant experience. And technology is allowing you to do that without getting in the way of the restaurant experience.
And I guess, if staff aren't run off their feet, then that also helps with retention. It just makes me think, I was chatting to a restaurateur recently who's got robots cooking his Korean fried chicken. And he was saying it's not only that the robot always shakes the fryer in the right way and never leaves it frying for too long. It's also that his human employees don't have to stand by the fryer getting, splashed with hot oil or breathing in the fumes. And it really does help with keeping people engaged longer term. And there's not that turnover, which of course, results in training and, inevitable errors and, as people, school up. So yeah, it is really interesting to think about it like that.
I was just talking, you're making me think, I was just talking with another restaurateur 2 weeks ago, and they were telling me exactly that, where, obviously because there's a staff shortage, they were having staff coming to them at the end of service saying, I'm done, I need 2 weeks off, I need to take a leave, etc. And because of that, not only did they have empty rosters, 20% of their staff were on leave at any given point because of exactly as you describe. It just, they can't keep up with the volume of activity in the restaurant because they're just so short staffed. And again, that is where technology steps in and prevents that burnout. You want these staff who are working in restaurants to have great experience and turn this into careers and create great guest experiences. And again, that's where technology fills that gap.
Yeah, burnout is such a compounding problem, isn't it? Where if someone needs to go on leave, then what happens to those who are remaining?
Yeah, and everybody left has to take the load.
Yeah, no, it's super intense. So, what's the plan while you're in Australia, Peter? Is there a lot of eating, a lot of drinking, a lot of chatting?
Definitely a lot of eating, definitely a lot of drinking, chatting with the teams. Obviously, we have two big offices for the hospital unit in Lightspeed, or in Australia for Lightspeed. We have the Sydney office, the Melbourne office. I'll be Sydney for the first bit of this week, going down to Melbourne at the end of the week, visiting the office down there, obviously visiting some customers as well. And just meeting with not only our teams, but meeting with restaurateurs. Obviously, I mentioned a couple of the ones that I was out with already. I'm actually headed to one later this afternoon, and just getting feedback. What's going well in the restaurant industry? What's not? What can we do as a technology company, as a service provider to these venues to help them continue to grow? Obviously, we love the numbers that are coming out of seeing that super strong growth of the Lightspeed venues outperforming their peers here in Australia. But obviously, we want to do more and continue to grow with them.
Well, it's really, I love the idea that you're over here visiting the future and you can take the intel back to the rest of the world. Thank you so much for sharing part of your journey with us today, Peter. And it's great to hear such optimism about, challenges, but optimism from the industry worldwide.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a big year for the hospital industry. It's been a big year for Lightspeed. And I think the next 12 months in the hospital industry are going to be just fantastic, and I'm super excited for it. Yeah,
awesome. Well, lots of eating to be done.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dani. Have a great day.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This